And we're back on Inside the Ropes, and we promised you that a member of the New World Order would be coming on the show, and we've had controversial guests before, but I think it's safe to say with this man that controversy created cash. He's the founding father of the NWO, he was the general manager of Monday Night Raw, and now he's an executive in TNA. It's the one and only Eric Bischoff. Eric, welcome to Inside the Ropes.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, Eric, I guess we should kind of start at the beginning because you started out in the AWA under Varun Gandhi and you did sales and then you moved into announcing. What are your kind of early memories of your time in the AWA with Varun?
Oh, wow. There's very many of them. I reflect upon them often. I think one of my earliest memories was really just the excitement that I felt having the opportunity to work within the professional wrestling industry. Having been a fan all of my life and growing up with professional wrestling, and from really out of nowhere, just almost by coincidence, having the opportunity to work within that industry was a little bit of a dream come true. And I just remember every day that I went to work just being, excited and amazed that I had that opportunity.
So, Eric, a lot of people kind of point to one of the big success points of signing Hulk Hogan. But one of the other guys that you brought over to WCW not long after was Randy Savage. The WWF had made him a commentator. He wasn't getting to get into the ring as much. What are your memories of sort of bringing Randy over to WCW, and what was it like working with him? Because he's such a enigmatic character that everyone's got something to say about him. He just seems like a one of a kind.
Well, Randy certainly was one of a kind, and I know it seems to wrestling fans like hiring Hulk Hogan was kind of the turning point with regards to WCW's success, and the truth is it wasn't. It was certainly one of the more visible turning points, and it's one that the television audience and wrestling fans can easily identify because they didn't see what was going on behind the scenes. But it took a lot of success. It took a lot of progress in order to be in a position to be able to hire Hulk Hogan. And I for a while, was building on, in some cases, small successes, in other cases, large successes, and taking risks, some of them small, some of them pretty obvious, some of them pretty big. And really going to Disney MGM Studios was the thing that really, in the minds of the business side of the wrestling business, in the business side of Turner Broadcasting, that was the pivotal point where even my harshest critics within the executive committee at Turner, when I say my harshest critics, not me personally, but the WCW as a division, even those people who were the harshest critics of WCW within the Turner organization realized that there was something valuable there. And once we turned that corner, it made it easier for me to be able to take a visible risk like Hulk Hogan. And that paid big dividends in many respects. Not so much in the eyes of the wrestling audience, but in the eyes of the business community, it started to pay big dividends, which then made it easier to hire an additional big name like Randy Savage. Now, as far as my memories of Randy, he was a volatile, charismatic, artistic, perfectionist, insecure, overconfident, all those things kind of, in one big ball of personality. But that's usually the case with most really great performers. They're very complex people, and Randy was certainly the epitome of a complex personality.
And in 1997, famously, Bret Hart came over to WCW, and it kind of seemed through various interviews that he did afterwards that he was never really the same after Montreal. Were you happy with his run in WCW when he came over, or how did you kind of perceive when Bret came over his sort of attitude towards his run in WCW?
Well, I had no idea when he came over what the perception of his run was going to be. I had talked to Bret a couple times and met with him, several times prior to him actually making the jump. I was obviously excited to have him, but clearly Bret Hart was a very broken, and in my opinion still is, based on the interviews that I hear him do, and he's still a very sad and kind of broken, bitter person. And that was pretty evident when he first came over. He was a shadow of, or a shell of, his former self. His former self being wherever Bret was at is in the highlight of his character. The Bret Hart that I got was kind of a broken, sad shell of that. And quite honestly, I don't think he's ever come out of it. Just listen to him. It's unfortunate.
And you kind of touched on it there, and I guess I need to ask you about it at least, is that recently he's come out sort of slating you and Hulk being a part of TNA, and he said that you know nothing about wrestling and that you're an idiot and stuff like that. What do you think when you hear things like that? Do you kind of just try to not let it get to you? What do you think when you hear someone like that who, I guess back then, seemed to have a good relationship with you, that now just seems to, say these things?
A couple things, really. One, I don't really pay that much attention to it because it's not unusual for, especially, guys like Bret Hart, that era. The only way they know how to get over is by trying to get over at the expense of someone else. And Bret is still trying very hard to be relevant. He's unfortunately, he's no longer relevant. He was a big star. He had a big name at one point. He was an important character in the history of the business, but he's not any longer. And I'm sure that that's hard on him. I know, I know myself how it feels to realize that your biggest days and your best days as a performer are behind you. I'm very comfortable with that. I've embraced it. But a lot of guys who have never been anything other than performers have a hard time with that. It's not easy getting older in the wrestling business, believe me, when you're a performer and you're surrounded by younger and younger people who in many ways aren't as over or as popular or as skilled as you may have been or maybe as you are now. But, this business is, a business that's served by youth and change. And for someone like Bret, that manifests itself in his personality by lashing out at others. And it's funny, when Bret came to me, he hated Vince McMahon. He wanted to kill Vince McMahon. He hated everybody in the WWE, everybody from The Office to half the roster, and he didn't have a good thing to say about Vince or any of the McMahons. Well, when he had an opportunity to go to work for them, he had to shift that. Mm-hmm. And then his hatred was for somebody else. And it was either for Bill Goldberg, for, giving him a concussion, or it was for, now it's for me and it's for Hulk, where, there's no reason for it. There's no rhyme or reason for it. And as far as, his opinion of my value in the wrestling business or what I've achieved or not achieved, I'll let my body of work and my success and the history that I've made in this business speak for itself. I run a successful television production company, one of the most successful ones in Hollywood. I'm still active and very successful in the professional wrestling business. I know what I've done from a storyline point of view and in terms of changing the way people perceive the wrestling business and the changes that I made that forced changes that still exist today in WWE. I know that I was instrumental, if not, in many cases solely responsible for much of that. So I'm quite comfortable with what I've accomplished, and Bret's hard opinion of me or anybody else's doesn't change that.
And now, obviously, you're a part of TNA. You've been there for about 3 years, and the company's now live on Thursday nights. Impact's gone on the road. Do you think these changes that have kind of happened in the time that you've been there are important in the growth of the company?
Undoubtedly. Absolutely. Just like a storyline has to grow, a company has to grow. A company can't stand still. You either grow or you die. It's just a fact of business life. And TNA is growing, has grown a lot in the last 3 years, has become much more sophisticated in the way they approach television. It's no longer the good old boy, southern kind of small regional territory mentality that dominates the storytelling and the television production that it did in the past. Mm-hmm. We treat stories now in a much more sophisticated way, not unlike any other scripted television series does. We focus heavily on 3-act structures on each episode. We focus heavily on story arcs and beats, long-term planning. We watch our formats and dissect our television formats, and we scrutinize them constantly until we produce them. And we're very cognizant of the viewing habits of our audience. We do a tremendous amount of research, sophisticated research through third-party television research companies that help us really zero in on what the domestic U.S. television audience is really looking for and what they're responding to. All of those are things that are completely new to TNA. They're not new in other forms of television. We do them often in a lot of the other television products that my partner Jason Hervey and I produce. Mm-hmm. But within wrestling, especially within TNA, it's brand new territory. And I think a lot of our growth and a lot of our success and the relationship that we have with our network is because of the fact that we're treating the product with much more respect and with the sophistication that primetime television deserves.
And one of the angles recently that's been very talked about is the Aces and Eights angle, that obviously culminated at Lockdown with Bully Ray president thing that came up. Some people have kind of drawn comparisons of Aces and Eights with the NWO. What do you think when you hear that sort of comparison? Is that something that you're kind of proud of because it was a successful thing that you had before? Or what do you think when you hear people compare those two?
I think it's a fair comparison. They're both outside groups. But I think that while there may be other similarities, and I'm sure if I sat down and really thought about it, I could probably draw other parallels. But the NWO, the premise, the core of that story was two guys who were previously with WCW. They had, both Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had a long history with WCW long before they went to WWE. When Kevin and Scott went to WWF and WWE, they became bigger stars, and their bitterness and resentment towards WCW for not treating them the way they felt they should have been treated and making them the stars that they went on to become was very obvious to the audience. Kevin and Scott would talk about it anytime they got an opportunity to. Mm-hmm. And that was the core of that story. It was two disgruntled individuals who felt like they weren't treated fairly coming back to seek revenge on WCW. That's completely different than the premise of Aces and Eights. Aces and Eights, as we've now seen, is a manifestation, if you will. That group is Bully Ray, who had not had the success that he was hoping to have last October, putting together a group of guys who would, one episode at a time, basically set things up in such a way that Bully would have the perfect opportunity to come in and pull the wool over Hulk Hogan's eyes, pull the wool over Brooke Hogan's eyes, pull over the wool over Sting's eyes, convince everybody on the roster that he was a good guy and somebody that could be trusted. And in the precise moment when he had everybody's trust and Jeff Hardy turned his back on him, Bully Ray captured that moment, hit him over the head with a hammer, and went on to win the title. So while there are similarities that are obvious in some respects, the premise of those two stories are completely different.
And what about you in TNA in the future? What are your kind of your goals and things you're looking forward to in TNA?
Oh, I guess I'd have to break them down into kind of 2 or 3 different categories. I really don't plan on being in the wrestling business too much longer, and I say that in a very grateful and a very positive way. This business has been great for me and my family, and it's been nearly 30 years now. That I've been able to make a good living, and in some cases a better than good living, in the wrestling industry. And I'm first and foremost really grateful for that, and I'm still shocked to this day about it. So really my goal now isn't to try to accomplish anything professionally, because I've kind of been there and done that. My biggest goals right now are, and this is going to sound, corny, but I really like teaching. I like watching guys like Matt Conway and David Lagana and some of the younger guys in the production staff, and even guys in production that have been around a long time, watching them grow into new areas that they haven't really been able to spread their wings in before. I really, really enjoy watching that happen and supporting that, because someday, hopefully someday, in the near future, I'm going to be able to walk away from this business. And when I do, I want to be able to know that I was able to shape, in one way, shape, or form, to one degree or another, guys who will carry on and be the future of this industry. So that's my personal goal, is to be able to contribute as much as I can to younger writers and producers to help make them better, or at least give them a different perspective, so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they will look back and say, yeah, I remember Eric Bischoff taught me that. Or I remember I did this when I was working with Eric Bischoff, and I remembered, this is a great way to use this kind of a story or this kind of a production technique. Mm-hmm. That's my biggest goal, to be very honest about it.
Well, Eric, we'd like to thank you for your time, for coming on the show. And I guess the last thing is, you're going to be, for fans who are going to New York or New Jersey for the WrestleMania weekend, they're going to get a chance to see you now, because you're going to be at the Beacon Theatre on April 5th with Hulk Hogan. What can fans expect that night if they buy a ticket to come and see you and Hulk trade stories, and what kind of made you decide to do it?
Well, Hulk asked me to do it, number one, and it kind of goes back to about a year ago or a year and a half ago. Someone had an idea of doing kind of a theater in the round type question and answer format, and Hulk asked me to host that, and I did, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed kind of the intimacy of a question and answer format in a theater type of environment. It's just more intimate, and the nature of the questions are different because people have more time. They can think through the questions they want to ask, and we have the time to answer them in more depth, much like we're doing here, as opposed to a typical question and answer at an autograph session where you've got really about a minute or two before somebody behind you is kind of pushing you along in line trying to get their picture. So I really like the format. It allows us to really answer some great questions in depth. And I like, Hulk and I are close friends. It's fun for me. So in terms of what you can expect, I think, people ask a lot of the same questions, whether it's on an interview like this, or in a question and answer environment. Many of the questions you hear, you will have heard before in another interview or read it in another magazine in one way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. But having the time to really answer those questions, which sometimes leads to other more in-depth questions, that's what fans are going to get an opportunity to experience. And looking forward to it. It was a lot of fun the first time we did it, and I'm sure it'll be a great time this time.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, because this interview is a result of you donating money to a nice young lady by the name of Destiny Daniel, who got into a pretty serious car wreck, and I made a decision, as well as donating money myself, to try to use my site and to reach out to wrestling fans to raise some money for her. She's a very kind young lady that donates a lot of her time and her energy to saving horses that have been abandoned around the country. I don't know if that's as big a deal in your neck of the woods as it is here, but it was a sad story, and she's a great young lady. So thank you for donating and as a result setting up this interview. And it's been a great interview, by the way. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. We will put that up on our Facebook page, and people can donate to that great cause if they feel inclined to. But yeah, Eric, thank you very much again. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that the donations keep coming in for your friend.